Would you raise your hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you please state your full name?
And Jeffrey Edward Epstein, and my residence address is 6100 Red Hook Boulevard in Virgin Islands.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes.
Jeffrey Epstein, once praised as a sharp-minded financier and a familiar face at New York's most exclusive parties, crafted the image of a man who had it all: wealth, influence, and a network that reached from politicians to royalty to billionaires. Until one day, the glittering facade collapsed when he was charged with trafficking underage girls. Even after Epstein's death in his jail cell, the secrets locked within his files were never fully revealed. Names of powerful figures in politics, finance, and beyond remained sealed, fueling endless speculation about who may have been entangled in his world.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
The scandal didn't end with Epstein's downfall. It shattered public trust in the very institutions meant to deliver justice. To this day, questions echo unanswered: who enabled him, who looked the other way, and how many of the powerful have yet to face the scrutiny they deserve. Let's dive in. Jeffrey Edward Epstein's beginnings were about as ordinary as you can picture for a kid who would later mingle with presidents and princes. He was born in 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, the first of two sons in a working-class Jewish household. His father, Seymour, kept the parks clean for the city. His mother, Pauline, was a school aide. Neighbors remember Jeffrey as a bright but stocky, quiet boy who spent more time bent over math puzzles than playing stickball on the street. By the age of 16, he had already finished high school, a sign of the academic drive that would become part of his early myth. He enrolled at Cooper Union, one of the few tuition-free colleges in Manhattan, to study mathematics. Later, he transferred to New York University's Curran Institute, a powerhouse for math and physics. But somewhere along the way, the discipline that made him precocious as a teen faded. After 3 years, he left without a degree. That pattern of starting in promising places but slipping out through a side door would follow him for life. Epstein's first adult job came not on Wall Street, but in the classroom. In the mid-1970s, he was hired to teach calculus and physics at the Dalton School, a prestigious private academy on Manhattan's Upper East Side, an address synonymous with old money families and their heirs. Former colleagues recall the young teacher as unusually flamboyant for the button-down culture of Dalton-tailored jackets with loud colors. The charm of someone who wanted to be noticed. Rumors about blurred professional boundaries showing up at student parties. Paying too friendly attention to female students eventually cost him the job. Yet, it was at Dalton that Epstein made the connection that would launch his financial career. Among Epstein's students was the child of Alan Ace Greenberg, then CEO of Bear Stearns, a powerhouse investment bank. Through that connection, Epstein was invited to join Bear Stearns as a junior trader, an extraordinary offer for someone without a college degree or a Wall Street resume. Once inside Bear Stearns, Epstein proved unusually quick at spotting arbitrage opportunities and explaining complex trades. Within 4 years, he leapt from assistant trader to limited partner, an ascent so fast it raised eyebrows even in an era of 1980s excess. But the ride ended in 1981 when the SEC investigated insider trading activity. No criminal charge was filed against Epstein. Yet he was asked to resign, a quiet exit that again fit the pattern of stepping out before the spotlight grew too hot. Leaving Bear Stearns, Epstein drifted into the murkier edges of Finance Towers Financial, a debt collection firm later unmasked as a $500 million Ponzi scheme run by its CEO Stephen Hoffenberg. Hoffenberg served nearly 20 years in federal prison. Epstein somehow avoided indictment, fueling decades of speculation that he was either lucky, legally insulated, or shielded by someone powerful. Among the rumors, a supposed connection to international arms middleman Adnan Khashoggi. Even hints never proven that Epstein occasionally provided financial intelligence for undisclosed agencies. A seized Austrian passport with stamps from the Middle East only deepened the intrigue. By the late 1980s, Epstein reinvented himself again, this time as a private wealth manager with an aura of exclusivity. His firm, J. Epstein & Co., claimed it would only serve clients worth at least $1 billion. The first and most pivotal was Leslie Wexner, the retail magnate behind The Limited and Victoria's Secret. Through Wexner's trust, Epstein gained effective control over vast holdings: real estate, aircraft, art collections, amassing the trappings of immense fortune while keeping almost no transparent record of how he earned his fees. Some former associates would later accuse him of siphoning off as much as $50 million from Wexner's accounts, charges he denied. By the time the 1990s began, Epstein had gone from a Brooklyn math prodigy to a man with a Gulfstream jet, a Manhattan mansion, and no clear paper trail of how he paid for either, already crafting the aura of a financial phantom whose wealth seemed to materialize from thin air. If Epstein's fortune seemed to appear out of thin air, his influence came from something even more intangible: the company he kept. Through the 1990s and 2000s, Epstein positioned himself not just as a wealthy financier, but as a gatekeeper to elite circles. His dinner tables in Manhattan, Palm Beach, and on a private island in the Caribbean regularly hosted former presidents, royal figures, world-class scientists, media personalities, and billionaire CEOs. Photographs and flight logs later confirmed that these were not rumors. Global leaders had indeed been in his orbit. What made this network extraordinary was not just its reach, but the blind spot it created. Even as whispers of Epstein's interest in underage girls circulated in New York's high society, invitations to his parties kept flowing. A 2008 sex offender conviction should have been the end of his public standing. Instead, he was still welcomed at charity galas, scientific conferences, and private fundraisers. For Epstein, these connections worked like a reputational shield. If heads of state, tech pioneers, and celebrated academics were seen with him, then surely people assumed he must be legitimate. That illusion of legitimacy allowed him to move quietly, recruit new contacts, and sustain his empire far longer than most suspected. Some investigators and journalists have long wondered whether those high-profile relationships were more than just social currency, perhaps even a form of leverage. No solid proof of blackmail has ever surfaced publicly. Yet the mere possibility that Epstein might have held compromising information over influential people remains one of the most unsettling unanswered questions in the case. Behind the polished doors of Jeffrey Epstein's estates, marble foyers glowing beneath chandeliers, the distant hum of private jets landing at dusk lay a reality more like a psychological thriller than the high society glamour it projected. The opulence was a curtain behind it. According to survivors and prosecutors, Epstein built a machinery of recruitment and control that thrived in plain sight for years. At the heart of that operation was Ghislaine Maxwell, the impeccably dressed British socialite who appeared to New York's elite as a charming hostess, but was described by victims as the gatekeeper, the one who welcomed new arrivals with a warm smile, offered tea in crystal cups, spoke of modeling opportunities and tuition help, and turned trust into the first step of a darker story. Recruiters, sometimes Maxwell herself, sometimes young women already trapped inside, sought out girls from schools and working-class neighborhoods of Palm Beach, offering what sounded harmless: a quick massage for $100, promises of mentorship or easy money. Once inside Epstein's homes, the tone shifted. The massage table became a stage for exploitation, and some victims were pressured to bring in friends for finder's fees, creating what prosecutors would later call a pyramid of abuse disguised beneath the gloss of luxury. Across properties in Palm Beach, Manhattan, and a New Mexico ranch, Epstein reportedly installed hidden cameras and kept extensive photo collections, details that added an unspoken layer of intimidation for anyone who might speak out. The most haunting emblem of this control was Little St. James, Epstein's private island in the Caribbean, a sun-drenched speck that looked like a retreat but functioned as a fortress, accessible only by jet, helicopter, or boat. It cut visitors off the moment the water closed in behind them. Survivors recalled the silence: no cell service, no neighbors, broken only by the wind across the docks. A blue and gold dome structure loomed on the hilltop like a cryptic monument. fueling speculation about its purpose. One girl later described trying to swim under moonlight toward a neighboring island, only to be intercepted and warned never to try again, an image that captured the isolation and powerlessness many felt there. This hidden network of abuse was shielded, in part, by the facade of wealth and prestige and by the constellation of influence that revolved around Epstein. His Boeing 727, dubbed by tabloids the Lolita Express, ferried staff, guests, and victims between his properties as if they were pieces on a private chessboard, wrapped in the illusion of exclusivity. The guest lists at his residences read like a cross-section of global power former presidents and prime ministers. Royalty, celebrated scientists, Hollywood figures, billionaire CEOs. That proximity to the elite served three purposes. It gave Epstein the appearance of legitimacy that made his invitation seem trustworthy. It created a protective halo that discouraged scrutiny, and it suggested leverage whispers that private gatherings, flight logs, even hidden cameras could be used against anyone who crossed him. Flight records from the Lolita Express showed a revolving door of high-profile passengers, evidence of access, not necessarily of crime, yet enough to raise questions about how easily Epstein moved within these circles. Several of those names later faced public scrutiny, most visibly Britain's Prince Andrew, who lost his royal duties after a civil settlement with an accuser, while others, including former U.S. Presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, denied wrongdoing but could not avoid the optics of proximity. Whether Epstein truly weaponized those connections remains one of the case's enduring mysteries. Victims and reporters have long speculated about hidden recordings and compromising files. None have been confirmed. But the perception of such leverage persists, offering one explanation for how a convicted sex offender continued to operate for years with influence and leniency. In the end, Epstein's greatest asset may not have been his fortune or his private island, but the illusion of protection born from powerful company. An illusion that dazzled under the spotlight of charity galas while just beyond its reach. The darkest acts were staged in calculated silence. In July 2019, the FBI's Crimes Against Children Task Force reopened the case and raided Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. What they found stunned even seasoned investigators: thousands of photographs of young women and minors stored in locked safes, along with piles of cash and passports. Those discoveries reignited public anger not just at Epstein himself, but at the system that had allowed him to evade serious punishment for so long. The arrest in 2019 marked a turning point. Crowds gathered outside federal courthouses. Editorial boards demanded accountability not only for Epstein, but also for those who had protected him. The image of a wealthy, well-connected man finally facing justice after years of impunity struck a nerve with a society already questioning who the law truly serves. For many of the survivors, it was a bittersweet moment, proof that the truth could no longer be buried, yet also a reminder of how many years had been lost to silence and fear. On the morning of August 10th, 2019, barely 5 weeks after his arrest, Jeffrey Epstein was discovered unresponsive in his cell at Manhattan's Metropolitan Correctional Center, the official ruling suicide by hanging. Yet the circumstances felt more like the opening scene of a political thriller than a routine case. The two guards on duty admitted they had fallen asleep and skipped their rounds. 2 security cameras in the corridor outside Epstein's cell were reported to have malfunctioned at the very hours they were most needed. For a public already skeptical of the justice system's ability to hold the powerful to account, the scene felt almost scripted for distrust. The reaction was immediate and intense. Hashtags questioning the official account flooded social media. Overnight, the phrase "Epstein didn't kill himself" went viral, evolving from a meme into a cultural shorthand for the belief that the truth had been buried. Late-night shows echoed the slogan, protest signs carried it to the streets. The words captured not just suspicion over one death, but a larger collapse of faith in institutions meant to safeguard transparency and justice. Adding fuel to the fire were the missing or sealed pieces of evidence. Chief among them was Epstein's so-called Black Book, a contact list rumored to include prominent business leaders, politicians, and celebrities. While fragments had surfaced in earlier civil suits, much of it remained sealed, feeding speculation about who else might have been implicated. Others seized materials, photographs, Digital drives were either withheld from public view or reported as misplaced, deepening the sense of a cover-up. The timing of Epstein's death only sharpened the intrigue. Here was a man accused of trafficking minors who, if brought to trial, might have testified about powerful associates. To many, his sudden death looked convenient, as if the system had silenced a key witness to protect others who had crossed his path. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Some blamed political rivals. Others hinted at foreign intelligence. None were substantiated. But the absence of definitive answers let the speculation thrive. The fallout extended to public officials. Former Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta, who had approved Epstein's lenient 2008 plea deal as a federal prosecutor, resigned under renewed scrutiny. President Donald Trump publicly called Epstein's death suspicious, yet released no further records despite earlier promises of transparency, reinforcing perceptions of hidden interests at work. Whatever the ultimate truth, Epstein's death left a void where a public trial might have revealed networks of complicity and offered survivors their day in court. Instead, it became a symbol not only of one man's escape from accountability, but of a justice system many saw as once again failing the vulnerable. The unanswered questions, the broken cameras, the sleeping guards, the sealed records linger like a shadow over the case. A reminder that sometimes the deepest mystery lies not in the crime itself, but in how the truth is managed once the world starts asking too many questions. In the months following Jeffrey Epstein's death, the story did not end. It merely shifted its focus to the ripples left behind. One of the most chilling incidents occurred in July 2020, when a gunman disguised as a delivery driver appeared at the New Jersey home of federal judge Esther Salas, who had been assigned to a civil case tied to Epstein's finances. The attack left her 20-year-old son dead and her husband seriously wounded, although investigators later determined the shooter was a lone anti-feminist extremist with no verified link to Epstein's network. The tragedy underscored the climate of fear and suspicion surrounding anyone who touched the case. Meanwhile, the search for Epstein's longtime confidant came to a dramatic close. After months in hiding at a secluded estate in New Hampshire, Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested by the FBI in July 2020 on charges of aiding Epstein's trafficking operation, specifically recruiting and grooming underage girls between 1994 and 2004. Her trial in late 2021 became a proxy for the one Epstein never faced, as survivors testified about years of manipulation disguised as mentorship. In June 2022, Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, a verdict that brought a measure of accountability but few new answers about the powerful figures in Epstein's orbit. The fallout spread across oceans and palaces. Prince Andrew, long photographed at Epstein's gatherings, relinquished his royal duties after settling a civil lawsuit brought by Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most outspoken accusers. In the modeling world, Jean-Luc Brunel, a French scout and associate accused of supplying girls to Epstein, was found dead in his Paris jail cell in early 2022, in what officials ruled a suicide, and eerie echo of Epstein's own death that further fueled public doubt. Even as these headlines played out, the emotional toll on survivors remained heavy. Virginia Giuffre, whose photograph with Prince Andrew had become an emblem of the case, continued to campaign for victims' rights but passed away unexpectedly in 2023, a loss that was met with grief and renewed calls for mental health support for survivors of trafficking. For many, these aftershocks revealed that the Epstein saga was less a closed chapter than an ongoing reckoning with how wealth and influence can shield predators, with how long justice can be delayed, and with how the trauma outlives the news cycle. The arrests, trials, and resignations brought partial accountability. Maxwell behind bars, a prince stripped of titles, a modeling agent dead under suspicious timing, yet they also left the public with an unsettling sense that much of the truth remains sealed behind court orders and untested evidence. The case's legacy is not only the crimes themselves, but the enduring distrust it has sown toward institutions that failed to stop them. The story of Jeffrey Epstein ends without the kind of courtroom reckoning the public had hoped for, leaving behind more shadows than answers. To this day, key questions linger in sealed files and untested testimony. Who among the powerful enabled his crimes? Why do critical documents remain redacted or locked away? Despite promises of transparency from leaders who once vowed to release them, These unresolved pieces have turned the case into a mirror held up to society's own inequities. It exposed how immense wealth can purchase access, influence, and even, at times, a different standard of justice, one that too often leaves survivors waiting while those at the top walk unscathed. In the end, Epstein's saga was never just about a single man's predation. It revealed the uncomfortable truth that the machinery of exploitation can thrive in full view, cloaked not by secrecy but by the legitimacy of boardrooms, royal palaces, and charity galas. The abuse was not hidden in the shadows of a secret society as some conspiracies suggested, but rather enabled by public figures whose reputations and institutions acted as cover. That recognition has deepened a crisis of trust toward law enforcement that once struck secret deals, toward the courts that allowed evidence to stay sealed, and toward leaders who seemed immune to accountability. For the survivors, the headlines and viral slogans will never fully capture the cost of what was taken from them: years of silence, fear, and lost opportunities for justice, for the public. The case remains a cautionary tale about how power concentrates and how easily it can be weaponized against the vulnerable. It is also a reminder that transparency is not a courtesy, but a safeguard without it. Even the truth can be managed, delayed, or denied. As we close this chapter, we invite you, the viewers, to reflect on what lessons can be drawn. How do we hold institutions accountable when they fail to protect the most vulnerable? What reforms are needed to ensure that wealth and proximity to power no longer place anyone above the law? Your thoughts, your questions, and your vigilance matter, because these stories do not fade simply when the cameras turn away. If you found this documentary illuminating, consider supporting independent investigative work by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with others who care about transparency and justice.